And the defense was actually a great guy, actually a friend of mine. He says to him, well, sir, your business is actually making more money than before you were hurt, and you're doing less. This seems like a pretty good thing. And our client just looked up at him and he said, you don't get it. You just don't get it. And every juror, there was no explanation beyond that. You could feel like this force of joining. You're like, oh boy, they gave us $10 million verdict as every penny we asked for.
This is RVA Trial Lawyers, Virginia's trial lawyer podcast, hosted by Sharif Gray and Niall Abuzaki.
All right, we're back, and today we've got Chris Finney joining us. Chris, it's a privilege to have you on our podcast. You and I have become friends over the last few years, and it's been really awesome kind of following you from afar. So thank you for taking the time to join us. If you wouldn't mind, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, thanks for you guys for having me. I'm not the most exciting story, but I'm from St. Louis originally. That's where I practice, mostly practice in the state of Missouri, but we really don't get to the west side of the state. I'm a married man. I've got 5 kids. Run a practice here there's now, I think we have our 10th employee. So that's pretty much the gist of it. Went to school here locally and didn't get very far.
Well, Chris, so you and I connected a while back on LinkedIn, and I'm sure Tony Albrecht had something to do with it. And then I know we met for the first time at TLU Vegas. And I think like you, I share this love for plaintiff's personal injury trial work, and like now, also a trial junkie. So what got you into this trial world? Like, did you know going into law school, hey, I want to be that guy you see in the movies? Like, I want to be that trial lawyer?
No, and I still remember the first time I saw you. We had sent messages back and forth. I was out there presenting with my cousins on a case. And then I saw you walk in and you're pretty yoked up. And I was like, oh, Jesus, that is obviously Sharif. He's jacked. So I still remember that, had a great conversation with you then. And my cousins as well really enjoyed you. But in terms of the law school situation for me was maybe a little bit atypical. I actually was waitlist, it would be generous at the law school. I did not get in at first, and then there was a lot of applicants, and so they put a lot of us in the night school, the part-time night school, with an opportunity to transfer to the day school if we could kind of stick with it. And there was actually some pretty good people in the night school, some really great friends that I still have that made it all the way through. But I was going to law school because I didn't really know what else to do. My dad's an attorney. He was a plaintiff's lawyer. My uncle here in St. Louis is a plaintiff's lawyer, very, very well-established plaintiff's lawyer, has been for 60 years. And a lot of my other uncles had gone to law school and not practice law. So I thought actually I could, I was inspired by the late Mike Leach, who was a football coach for Texas Tech and Mississippi State. And he passed away a couple of years ago. He had gotten his law degree, and so had Tony La Russa, the Cardinals manager back in the day. And I thought, well, I could get that and see what happens, because I wanted to be a football coach. And I had spent a year out in Denver as a football coach in high school, and I was volunteering as a teacher there through my old high school. And I thought, well, I'll go to law school and see what happens. And never really intending to be a full-time practicing lawyer when I got out. But it just so happened that a professor saw me doing my, trial ad last trial at the end of the year and thought I had some kind of potential. And I've always been, probably like you, Sharif, fairly coachable. I played sports all the way up through college. And so it was like, if somebody with some authority said, you need to do X, I usually did it, because I thought they, sounded like they know what they're talking about. So he said, you need to go out for the trial team. I'm putting you on the trial team. And I said, I didn't try out, and I'm not like a real law school extracurricular guy. Like, I had a lot of trouble in law school with grades. Attendance was an issue because I was still coaching football, and it's really hard to coach football with practice after school and games at night. When you go to the night school, it's not really conducive schedule-wise. But he told me to go out for the trial team, and I got on the trial team and absolutely loved it and did 2 years there. And that kind of planted the seed for me to start, okay, maybe I can do something I really like, that's fun, that kind of gets the competitive juices going and also allows me to have a family and a life and things like that. So that's kind of where it went, and it's kind of snowballed from there. Very fortunate to have like my cousin, who's a great trial lawyer as well, same age as me. I played football with him in high school and in grade school, and we're very close. And he has always been willing to try the worst cases with me, no matter what they were. And it's always good to have a partner in crime. We're not true partners in the law practice sense, but we collaborate a lot.
So how did that work out? I mean, it sounds like you've got a lot of close friends and family who are plaintiffs' attorneys, but at some point you decided, you know what, I'm just going to go out and do this on my own. What went into that?
So my dad, so I was a prosecutor for a couple of years, and the circuit attorney's office is the city of St. Louis's state's attorney's office. And there's a lot of, for good or bad, there's a lot of an opportunity for experience. And so that's a traditional path for a lot of plaintiff trial lawyers to go to the circuit attorney's office, be an ACA, assistant circuit attorney, for a few years, get some really good trial experience, get in front of the judges, get on your feet, do some preliminary hearings, all that type of stuff, and get comfortable doing that. So I took that similar path, but I ended up leaving way earlier due to the fact that, student loans just were absolutely crushing me. The salary there was really low, unfortunately, and the student loans were very high. And my wife was pregnant with our first kid, and 2 years into the circuit attorneys, I had to quit because I showed my boss. I was like, I'm literally in the red by a lot every single month. Like, we went through like the finances of my life, and I was like, I cannot afford to work here. And so then I got a job at an insurance defense firm that doubled my pay, and I absolutely hated that. And so I called up my dad, who was a sole practitioner forever, still is to this day, and he said I could come work in the basement. So I went over there and worked in the basement, and was taking traffic tickets and doing all, I was going to do criminal work. I was going to do whatever. You had it. I was doing it. I was trying small claims cases, which in Missouri are $5,000 or less, but I figured I could get like a $1,600 fee out of it, Judge Judy style. And then some of those got appealed, and it was not very financially successful. But I was trying a lot of stuff out. I was with my dad for a little bit, but, he's a sole practitioner for 30 plus years. My brother was working there too. We tried some different setups to kind of keep it individualized, but in the end, I just decided, it's best for everybody if I just kind of go out on my own. And I went out on my own, was still in the same building, just in a different floor. And it kind of went from there.
And remind me, isn't it the story that it was like your second case or something like that they gave you kind of the runway, right? It was first case went poorly, and then second case was like a 7-figure settlement. Is that right?
Yeah, so that is right. One of my first case is a settlement for $20,000. I thought it was actually pretty big. It was way down in like rural Southwest Missouri, and I was really pumped about it. And then a guy called me who I had interned with, who's still a good friend of mine, at the circuit attorneys, and he was an intern there when I practiced there. And he said, "Hey, I know this guy in my what are those those business circles I meet every week? I forget what they call them. It's like BNS maybe or something, BNF. I can't remember what it is, but he said, hey, I have a guy in here whose dad was in a crash and he's kind of hurt. Do you guys want the case? I was like, I'm in the basement. I have nothing else to do. Like, I will take the case." And it ended up that this guy had been rear-ended in a construction zone by a commercial motor carrier. And just by happenstance, they had called a couple other big marketing firms and never gotten called back. Like, just no one ever called them back. So we took the case and we settled the case for $1.25 million. And that was like kind of just took off from there. And I had no clue what I was doing, except I knew, my guy was hurt. And, I knew that there were like the hours didn't make sense for the miles the driver had traveled. Like I could do some simple mathematics that like, hey, you can't travel like 360 miles in 3 hours. That doesn't make sense. So we were able to get everything that was available there. And it kind of just snowballed from there, gave me a little bit more confidence. And then I wanted more and more confidence to try cases. And I kept trying different stuff, still do to this day, to see what would work. But the genesis was those early cases kind of gave me some confidence, which I'll be honest, very lucky to say I worked at my dad's office to get those cases referred to me. I don't think anybody was sending those cases to me on my own. And so I had a leg up over most people. And I kind of like to tell people, I was like, most people say you're born on third base. Well, I was basically born like falling into home plate, and I couldn't have missed it if I my legs fell off. So I've had a very fortunate situation that everything just kind of lined up for me for this practice.
I don't know if that's completely accurate, Chris. Like you've clearly, just watching you from afar, you've clearly put the work in. I think before I came to know you, I think I remember actually listening to you interview with Michael Cohen on a podcast a long time ago. And it was clear even to me back then that like you're a student of trial practice and that you've kind of been finding your own way by looking into the reptile, looking into what Sari de la Motte has, seeing the stuff that people are doing at TLU. Obviously, there's some Jerry Spenson thrown in there as well, right? And trial by all this stuff. Have you kind of found your philosophy at this point? I'm sure it's still a work in progress like it is for all of us.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, as I think about this, it's an ever evolving, like what you are, who you are is always evolving. So it's like, so will be my trial practice. So I may approach a case totally differently, not, this year than I did last year, because maybe I heard something that the damages for something else resonated with me. So let's frame the case around that. I can tell you I did try a lot of the reptile stuff and I got a lot of good things from that, but I also suffered tremendously, like lots of losses there. I think I had like 6 or 7 in a row and I just couldn't figure it out. And then I heard about Nick Rowley and Rick Friedman and I saw the things that they were doing and I started to try that stuff on and it felt right. It didn't feel fake or rehearsed. It felt more natural. And then I built up from there, like, well, who else can I listen to? And it started to grow. So you can listen to all these people. And now with CVN and all the podcasts, you can hear and see what everybody's doing and what resonates with you. And so that is how it's built up. But recently we've been really trying to do, we haven't had a trial recently, which is making me very anxious, but we haven't, we're trying to do a lot of speed trial. And the Joe Fried is a big proponent of that. And I've really gravitated toward Joe's approach. Not only the approach to cases, but the approach to his life, the introspection, all those things, because I think that makes a well-rounded individual, which makes for a well-rounded trial lawyer, an authentic individual. And that's what I'm really trying to get after is, okay, I think the best trial lawyer is usually maybe the best person. Now, there are some psychos out there that can really pull the wool over your eyes and some sociopaths and get a good result. That happens. But, how I want to live is how I want to practice. And how I want to practice is how I want to live. And so it takes a constant evolution of, well, what are we doing now? We're all in different stages of our lives, right? I know, Sharif, I see you have something every weekend. You and your son go out and you have a routine. I think it's amazing. That just doesn't fit my schedule right now. You know what I mean? Maybe a few years ago it did, but now there's a different season of my life. So it's like, how am I going to fit those experiences that you're having? Those are important because they are growth experiences, they're bonding experiences, they're authentic experiences. How do I make those into my life in the situation I have? And so we constantly have to evaluate that, at least I do, to get me to be in the best position to be the best trial lawyer. Because I can't be worried about a whole bunch of extraneous crap about my internal feelings and all that stuff when I'm in the courtroom. I'm not that skilled to balance all of those things. I'm not that, I can't mask it all. I'm not a good hider of my emotions. And so I need to be centered. I need to be relaxed, and I need to be focused in all kind of phases of my life.
Chris, one thing you've touched on is being a good person and how that translates into being a great attorney. What I've noticed about you is every time someone asks you to introduce yourself, you start with your name, and then you go straight to your family and your 5 kids. And I don't know if you've noticed that about you, but I watched about 3 or 4 interviews, and that's how you started, which I appreciated so greatly. So why is that important? Because that's who you are as a human. Sometimes we allow the profession to define us rather than we define the profession. And talking to Joe Fried about this and how, as a human, do you define to professionally connect with people? And that's what differentiates trial attorneys, right? It's just being yourself, being your authentic self, waking up every morning, looking in the mirror, and the person that you see in the mirror is the same exact person everyone else sees. And that's how the connections are made. So I appreciated, your introduction today. And I was like, I wonder if he's going to start with, hey, this is who I am. I have 5 kids, which I loved. So continue on.
Yeah.
Well,
No,
Niall, I appreciate that. I don't know if I've ever noticed that, but now that you pointed out, I think that is how I say it almost every time. But because that is who I want to be. Because it goes back to, I would go to a lot of seminars when I was younger, and there'd be a lot of drinking from people, and almost a good number, not everybody, but maybe the group I was seeing was they were divorced or they were having struggles, and I never wanted that. I was like, there has to be a way to do this without like ruining your life. And that's when I started to hear about Rowley, and he was, bring your family, do these things, make it a focus. And I had not ever heard that type of stuff before, not because it wasn't out there. I'm sure it was. It wasn't in the circles I was hearing. And I wanted to be more like that, because I do believe that if you are a good father and a good husband, and probably a good husband before a good father, I'm not quite sure which one goes first, but I think husband has to be first. The rest is going to fall in line. Of course, I'm still learning that. You can be a content person and an authentic person. And I'm still discovering my authenticity, I think, on a daily basis. I do a lot of therapy. I think it's really important. I really enjoy psychodrama. I've done some of it, and I like to explore that type of stuff. But I think the deeper and deeper we can get about the core of who we are, the more connections you make, the authentic connections you make. So when you go into a courtroom or you meet your client, it's probably really important when you meet your client to develop that connection, that authentic connection. Because I do think if I have an authentic connection with my client, like you always have a better connection than the defense, almost always, because they don't really know their person. It's very transactional. Not to say they can't get to know their person and enjoy them, but candidly, it's very transactional based on the billing model and all those things and all the work that they have. They just don't have time to say, I'm going to go for a day and hang out at the house of my client and look at their pictures and maybe bring them lunch and just kind of tool around. I mean, what's that look like on a billing sheet? I don't know. It probably doesn't look like it gets approved, but we have the luxury to do that. And then you develop these, small connections with people that when you get in the courtroom, like a friend of mine, Andrew Mundwiller, said, like, they see you and your client really care for each other and trust each other. The jurors, they want to get in on that shit, is what he says. Like, they want to they want to see that. They want to feel that. They want to experience that. That's why none of the cases are about medical bills or lost wages. And that, I think, is the thing we always have to describe to people. It's very common now, but it didn't used to be very common. And now the general public is starting to catch up to it, the ideas behind it, because those are the smallest parts of the damages. So I appreciate you pointing that out about my family. I kind of choked me up when you said it, because it's kind of a reflective thing to think about. And I never really thought about somebody noticing that. So I really do appreciate that from you.
You're more than welcome. And you touched on something that's important. It's probably more important to connect to your client, because that's what leads you to trial. And if, and I think sometimes we lose sight of that, is how do you, for me, connecting to the victim is so important, because I'm telling their story. If I'm not passionate about their story and their victimization, how am I going to be able to move the jury to find, for them and against the defendant, find the defendant guilty for what they did to them? And the same goes for a plaintiff's attorney. It's, well, before I can even present their case, I have to connect to this person that has been still victimized, right? They've been victimized. There's a wrong that's been done to them. And that leads you then to tell their story and then connect with the trier of fact.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, I think that connection initially is important, which is something which you bring up when you're a prosecutor like you are. Well, I don't know when this is going to be airing, but like you were. It is we're in the midst of this in my office right now. We have too many files. And we don't even have that many compared to most, but we have too many to make the connections that you're talking about. And this is a constant, not battle, but a topic of discussion with our CFO and the other senior lawyer in my office about how can we minimize these? How can we not minimize? I don't want to say minimize. How can we put our focus on our best connections where we can, because that will drive our cases and the most fulfilling results for people. And it is a difficult balancing act because it's very risky. And I heard Bill Barton, who is a very good attorney, pretty famous lawyer out in Oregon. I was reading his book and he said, make it a goal to operate always just under capacity, because that allows for flexibility. And so that allows you to jump in when something comes through the door. That allows you to take on a big case when that's going to require a big workload. And we are making it a goal, and it's difficult. I mean, it's really difficult to operate just under capacity, because when you do that, the vacation homes, the flashy cars, all the stuff has to be tempered. Like that, the material side has to be placed on hold, because you're making a choice to operate just under the capacity of your firm. Now, what is that? What does that capacity look like? I don't know. For us, we have an idea. We're going to test it out to see if we can get there. And then maybe it'll be less. Maybe it'll be fewer. Maybe it'll be, smaller and smaller case amounts with bigger and bigger exposures. And so we're trying to get to that point, because we are losing, like you talked about, the connection with our clients. And we're only picking those back up 2 months before trial. Or like right before their depot. And I don't like that. Like, I don't like that. It feels rushed. Then, if it doesn't start right, the clients aren't really trusting you to begin with, and it's not a good fit. So we're really trying to build that back up, because then we can think, all right, connection drives value for us. We can really increase maybe what is a $50,000 case could be a $500,000 case, or a $250,000 could be a $2 million. Those are the risks that we want to be able to take on.
It's more fun too. I mean,
it's more fun.
Yeah. I mean, I'd drive myself crazy if all I did was just settle cases pre-lit. Like I just can't do it. Right. It's one struggle that I've had lately, and we're actually really, I think the problem that you're talking about is something that we're dealing with as well, is we're getting a lot of cases, and it's fantastic. And it's really, really hard to say no, but there is only so much time in a day. And I personally have the problem of, like, I'm just not good at like doing a half-assed job. I know it sounds odd to say, but like, I feel like in cases, there's so much you can do. There's so many avenues of discovery that you can go down. There's so many depositions and that you can take and then try and climb the ladder on this angle and that angle. And it's just not easy, especially with this business model where it's one where you don't know if the phone's going to ring the next day. I mean, you have confidence that it will, but you also just don't know, right?
Well, and like you say, I don't have the agility of the mind. Like, people that can do 1 hour of this today, that, from 9 to 10, they're going to block this and work on this case. And then 10 to 11, they're going to work on this case. And then 12 to 1, they're going to work on this case. I can't do that. And I've struggled to like focus on, maybe that's why I wasn't very good at insurance defense, is because I couldn't jump from thing to thing. But I've really, beat myself up for years about like, hey, you got to plan your day and be rigorous with your time and compartmentalize this and that. I'm not good at that. And so I have to recognize who is good at that and who is not. And there are some people in our office that can really handle that. But like, I can't touch 5 cases a day. There'll be just horrible work product. I'll forget the last 3 cases I looked at, what I even did. I'll leave crappy notes in the file, if I leave any at all. And so I need to be, one at a time, like focused. And so today, I've only been working on 1 case all day, just because that's where my strength is. I don't know. It's definitely, my weaknesses are elsewhere. So but hopefully that would leave my strengths here. So I'm focusing on 1 case at a time, because if you're doing pre-lit, that's great. People have pre-lit departments. We have one here. People can jump in and out. I'll get like 10 notes in my emails from people, touching those files and getting things done. That is fantastic. I don't operate that way. So we're trying to identify, what's good and what's bad. And to get the human connection part of it is, it's hard for me. It's mentally and emotionally exhausting to jump in and out of 5 conversations a day with people about how their life is. I mean, I'll lose any empathy I have. I'll just be like, sucks for you. Yeah. Oh yeah. Can't do that anymore. Well, you heard Timmy told me 5 minutes ago, he can't do the same thing. Like, you hear it over and over and you'd get desensitized. And so we're trying to balance that too. Like, that's also a big issue, is like, hey, how do you not get desensitized to, this is another neck case, this is a back case, shoulder, oh, you have a fractured hip, well, we've had those before too. Like, you want to keep it fresh and alive and not fall into, I would say, certain parameters for certain cases.
Sure. Well, isn't that, I imagine that's one reason why medical bills and special damages, right, have become so common when you're talking about cases, right? Yeah. It's like, well, what's the coverage? What are the amount of the specials? Because it's like an easy way to just kind of jump in and jump out. But when we realize like what these cases are really about, and actually our episode with Joe Freed was a fantastic one. Mm-hmm. And Niall and him are now best friends because of watches. So it's fun to watch. But it's not about.
I did notice
Niall's good taste to watch too.
Nice.
I need to tell you.
Yeah. Niall is certainly enabling. So anyways, Judge Niall, right? So anyways, but no, I mean, I remember Joe Freed had this one line. He said, it's not about a broken foot. It's about the feeling that that person can no longer have because of that broken foot. Mm-hmm. That they suffered due to no fault of their own. And right. And I mean, that's deep, right? I mean, like, can't play with their kids. I mean, have to think twice every time they step out of a car. I mean, those little things are really the things that are important. That's the human life this person has lost. And that's not something, as you said, Chris, that you can just kind of jump in and jump out of.
No, you can't, because if you tell that story, just like you said, oh, well, they broke their foot. Oh, well, that sucks. I hurt my foot too. And I can't do whatever. But if you get to the layers of who it makes them, like I have a client who's a great friend. He's actually a repeat client. We had a great verdict for him, and he has no wife, no children. And he's like 65 years old. Okay. He and I could not be, I don't think he's ever taken a vacation. Pretty sure he hasn't. He worked 7 days a week at 2 different jobs, one he owned. And, I remember he's become a very good friend, like a very good friend. And he, during the first trial leading up to it, he would always pop in our office, right? I guess he felt comfortable coming in and saying hello. And we developed a very close relationship. And the biggest damage we had in his case was his inability to work. And it wasn't wages. It wasn't anything like that. It was a pest control business that he owned. And he had owned it for 50 years or worked in it for 50 years. His dad had started it when his dad was a teacher. And in the summers, he worked as a pest control guy. And it still is one of the most devastating injuries I've seen. It completely upended this guy's life, that he cannot anymore go into attics, that he cannot take care of. There's a little resort community out about 45 minutes west of St. Louis. He had 3,000 accounts out there. He had everyone's key to their home, their codes. He was allowed in whenever to make sure their homes are ready for the spring, for the summer, for the fall. Great, tremendous pride, like unbelievable pride in his work. Unbelievable. And they took it from him. It was taken, 100% taken. We had his customers testify about how he's not the same, and he said in that trial, this was the best, this is the most funnest, whatever the word is. We're sitting there, and the defense was actually a great guy, actually a friend of mine, become a friend of mine. I really liked the defense lawyer. And he says to him, well, sir, your business is actually making more money than before you were hurt, and you're doing less. Like this seems like a pretty good thing. And our client just looked up at him and he said, you don't get it. You just don't get it. And every juror, there was no explanation beyond that. You could feel like this force of joining. You're like, oh boy. And they gave us $10 million verdict as every penny we asked for. And the lady came out, and the foreperson, she was like crying. She's like, it's not enough. It's not enough. And then I'm like, son of a bitch. I knew I should ask for 15. But it was one of those situations where like less is more, right? He didn't have to explain all the shit at his job that he loved. You know what I mean? He just said, we let the other people talk about it. And then when it came up to his cross-examination, he was like, you don't get it. And I can't ever convince you of it because you don't know what this is like. And it was a real powerful experience. It was really one of the coolest things in the courtroom. So long way of getting to, those are the types of things, right, we're trying to elevate. But I will tell you, Sharif, I fall back to the medical bills too, as a quick denominator, or, where has he been for surgery, especially when you're looking at limits cases. I hate it, but it does provide a tool to open policies. If you can, the carriers still believe that is very important, and not to say bills aren't, but you can use it to open policies and make for some bad faith exposure. It's a pretty good tool for that. But I hate when we fall back to what are the meds on that? What are the specials? And kind of go from there. It's old habits die hard.
That's right. Well, we use them when they're helpful, right?
Yeah.
When they're not helpful.
Exactly right.
We're motion and eliminate, here we come, right? So
yeah.
I actually just lost one on that very issue. Was it last week? And I don't get it. And let me say my piece on this, then I'll move on. But why does it's not even a doctor, like a medical professional, someone in admin, their choice as to how much to bill a patient, how does that have any real correlation to the full and fair value of a personal injury case? It just doesn't. I mean, you go to a different, in where we live, Henrico Doctors Hospital is known for having high bills, which is fantastic if you're one of my clients, right? But if you go to a different hospital, you could do the same procedure and have far less bills. To me, it's so random, it's so arbitrary, and it really just discounts what I think is the real purpose of this type of work, and that is to recognize the full and fair value of what was taken from someone's health and quality of life, in addition to the deterrence piece, which is, I think, coming back to the prosecutor piece. And I've told Niall this over and over again. This is the best job in the world because I feel like a prosecutor, yet I've got a victim who I can give a check to at the end of this case.
And Sharif, it's, I'm thinking about that. And, I'm like, well, if I was on a PI side, how, and especially plaintiff side in particular, how would I break my argument? It is, the value, right? And it's also the deterrence. So there's two things to it. You got to focus first on how has this injury affected the life of this human being? And I'll tell you, often what I used to do, and I still do, in violent crimes, the first time I meet victims, I don't ask them to come to the office. I take my victim witness advocate, I take my detective, and I go to their home. And it's because I want to see if they have a Foley catheter and they have a bag that's just hanging right there, and their mom is sitting right there helping them to go to the bathroom or taking it to drain it for them. That's part of the story for me. Or I see, how this college athlete now has been bedridden for 3-4 months, and in the state that he's in, not only physically but emotionally, and when you walk in that house and you see the vulnerabilities, you live it with them, and then you can actually translate that to the jury. And I've done that on every violent crime case. When it comes to first meeting, I get a call from victim witness advocate. Now, when do you want to schedule it? I'm like, we're not scheduling an office. We're going out. I want to see them in their element. And, I'm thinking about the PI world and representing that plaintiff and talking about the full and fair value. How, better can you get the full and fair value than to go see them in their element when they've lost that value that you're trying to compensate them for? So it's powerful, but you're right. I mean, I do see the similarities now. It's unfortunate that I got appointed.
Yeah, it sounds like you're ready to come join us.
Yeah, sure, Sharif could find some work for you.
But then also on the deterrence piece, something that I've really loved about this work, and also just I didn't even know what personal injury was in law school. I barely knew what torts was until the week before finals, and I was like, wait, there is this thing called duty, breach, causation, and damage. Like I had no clue. I think my professor like wrote some books on baseball, and so anyway,
You're like, that's tort law. That's what I learned.
was-
Hey, go negligence. Here we go.
Yeah.
I believe that's a true statement too. Like I don't remember how much we talked about baseball, but anyways, UVA is a great school, but it can be very academic at times, maybe too academic. But I didn't know what it was, but I've found, especially when you have like the corporate defendant, and then you find the prior bad conduct, and then you realize that this isn't an isolated incident. This is a real safety issue, and then you can kind of climb the ladder, and then see all the absolute insane defenses that the corporation will bring, in the amount of money they'll spend to offer those arguments. And then if you get a good result, like it's really cool. I heard Randy McGinn on a podcast a few years ago, and she's a superstar, right?
Yeah.
But the one opportunity, she talks about how in some of her cases, she'll say the number is this, but if you make certain policy changes to make things safer, well, then the number comes down. I've never had that opportunity. I would love that opportunity, but to me, that is one of the best parts about this practice area, which you don't really see that often. And so, in addition to the recognizing the full and fair value of what was taken from someone's life, their health, their quality of life, the deterrence piece is fun, and it's super meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris, I imagine that probably also kind of drives what you do as well.
Well, it definitely does, especially on the corporate level. But the things that I'm struggling with now are the individual defendants. And so what I'm looking forward to this next trial, which is I think it's in May. It just got moved. The poor defense lawyer got pretty sick, and we had to move it. And he's a really good guy, actually. I consider him a friend too. But we had to move it, and there's not going to be a whole lot of deterrence in this one, because this is a really nice man who made a very bad mistake and caused a tremendous amount of harm. And so I'm very curious to see how the juror responds to just like, there's not really a villain in this case. Okay. And I've listened to everything, and everybody's like, oh, we got to find a villain. You got to find a villain to drive the damages. Well, sometimes there really isn't. And so I'm going to find out, there's not going to be a real villain. How powerful is love? Like how powerful will love go in this case for this elderly man who was catastrophically harmed in the hospital for a long time, all because someone, basically ran a red light, just zoned out on an early Sunday morning. They just didn't pay attention. So I think I hope there's room for both, right? The deterrence is great when you can dig and you can find, hey, you guys, corporate rep says, I wouldn't change anything. I think we did everything the right way. This is just a really unfortunate situation. You can hammer them. Right? They still don't get it. The only way they're going to get it is if you folks do something, like the call to action. But what happens when you have the cases where they say, we are so sorry. We are so sorry. Made a horrible mistake that day, and we're just thankful it wasn't worse or whatever. And here's a sum of money that we think is very, very substantial. We're going to see how that plays out coming up, but I'm excited to do that, because also I'm excited not to feel a lot of animosity and anger in a courtroom, right? To try a case against some very nice people with a nice defendant who I can genuinely get up there and say, these are good people, right? We just have a very different opinion of what actually has happened. And here's my point of view of what's happened. So let's talk about it, and you're going to hear other points of view. I think that's going to be really exciting to see how that plays out, because I do think there's got to be room for both if the law is actually just. Right? It shouldn't just be that the villains get punished.
I tend to think that the hardest cases that we have are the individual defendant, admitted liability, maybe throw in some minimal property damage and some soft tissue, right? Good luck. And then
luckily I have good property damage on this one.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Good. What does Mitnick say? Not visible property damage, right? So
not a lot of visible property damage.
There we go. Right.
Yeah, not a lot
around.
of it, which I've had this.
And now this is like the rear end. Well, you had that
yes.
that case. You were a defendant, right?
I was a defendant
you're very well familiar. But what I'll do is I'll use like I'll like talk about the football helmet. I'll be like, football helmet's still in great shape, but people are still dying of concussions later in life, right? So,
Yep.
Mitnick's got another good analogy with a chair, like you
The
take
chair.
an office chair. Yeah, so you're tracking, but no, it's just very difficult. And one thing that I've tried to do and I don't know if it's how successful it can be, but oftentimes I'll find like the defense will, in doing their job, let's say they'll spend a number of thousands of dollars on hiring these doctors to do records review and come in and say, actually, let's draw a line in the sand. Crash happened on this date. Well, he should have been better within 3 months. Everything after 3 months is degenerative, right? And so that's how I kind of find my villain.
Yeah.
It's like this is, they're not accepting responsibility and in a way that also,
or they're minimizing it. And
right.
I was hopeful in this case they were going to do that, but he's not even hiring a defense medical examiner.
Yeah.
He's just going with the trigger,
which is incredibly effective. Like, I mean, I think
incredible
I would
move.
lose every case if the defense attorney got up and said, we're sorry, here's a check. These guys just want 10 times more than this.
Exactly. Yeah. And so we'll see how that plays out. I think that's going to be their strategy. And I guess the key will be, how do we meet that strategy, right? How do we not really fight it, but meet it and go with it? And so I think we're going to try. We're going to do the same thing. I mean, there's no hatred in the courtroom for this one coming up. And I'm really excited. I mean, I am excited to do that, right? I think it will be a totally different experience. I think it'll be totally different than what the jurors are expecting. I'm sure it's going to be different than what the judge is expecting. And we'll see how it actually plays out. Will that be a driver of justice? We'll see.
They in this case, I'm thinking the value, the full and fair value and the story and them liking the plaintiff is going to play a huge role in this, right? Because if they like the defendant a little more than the plaintiff, then that's an issue, right? So it's how, and because we recently interviewed an individual who was talking about how he got a pretty good offer, prior to trial, and they rejected it, thinking that they're going to get way more going to trial. And when the client took the stand, the jury hated him because he was a liar. And guess what? They found in the favor of the defendant. He was like, liability was there, everything was there. So it's making sure the full and fair value is flushed out, and also them liking the plaintiff.
Well, and now you touched on it, like sometimes, and I think it's coming back around, but maybe 10 years ago or 5 years ago, more than 5 years ago, client credibility wasn't talked about as much. There's like, focus on defendant's conduct. But at the end of my experience was they gotta like your guy or your gal. Like, they have to want to do something for them. And if they're not likable, you can have the worst conduct in the world and you just be like, that's all great. They both suck. You know what I mean? And that's not good for a plaintiff. And so, as I've heard, I think Courtney Raleigh said this was at one of her seminars, it's very difficult to dislike someone up close, right? When you get to know them, when you get to experience them, when you get to see their life and where they came from and all that stuff. I can hate a lot of people that I see on social media, you know what I mean? And see the shit that they talk about or the stuff they talk about, and it drives me nuts. But really, if you got up close with them and you spent time with them and you learned about them and you saw things through their lens, you're going to develop that empathy, that understanding. You're not going to dislike them. You may have differences. And I had a client where we had extreme differences. It took till the Wednesday before the Monday we were starting trial where I finally felt that he trusted me when we went out to dinner. And I was like, oh my gosh. And it finally clicked, and things went really well. And he's also been a friend for a long time. But it's like back to the things we were just talking about, 15, 20 minutes ago about too many cases, not enough one-on-one time, not enough, getting to know people up close. Because like you said, now, if you get to know your client, you need to like them. You bring that power, that understanding to the courtroom. You share those experiences with the jurors. They now feel that, they understand that, they see them up close. You're going to have a really strong connection. At least that's been my experience.
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Chris, let's talk about the trial. If I remember correctly, one of the things that you have when you're in the courtroom is a sticky note. Can you share what that sticky note is and why you have it?
Yeah, I mean, I stole it from Joe Freed, but it's the WGON. The what's going on now. Is that the one you're talking about, Sharif?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. When I was a really bad prosecutor, Niall, as a trial lawyer, I was always worried about not upsetting my boss, right? Just not upsetting whoever's second chairing me, staying to the script that they gave me, doing all that. When I would do that, you lose literally every response. Like one of the questions we would have would be, who here doesn't understand English? And I was like, we're asking it in English. Like, who's going to raise their hand? Like, this is ridiculous. But, and then you'd have a guy raise his hand and be like, I don't understand English. I go, okay, well, you do. You just raise, like, let's get real. But you get so wrapped up in the process that you miss the experience. And so over the last, like, maybe 5 or 6 trials, maybe more, we really have made an emphasis to focus on what's going on right then. Like trust, and sorry, De La Motte has a lot to do with this. So does Joe Freed, but like trust that ready is a decision is what sorry says. Ready is a decision. Like you decide when you're ready. And you move through the case as the jurors experience the case. So you might have your binder or whatever with all your stuff in it. But what if you would never have to open it? What if, like, most of the cases I'm trying are 2-3 day cases, right? They're not like that. I'm not in trial for like a month. You know what I mean? It's not like a crazy schedule. But like, what if you can try that whole case, experience that whole case as the jurors experience it, right? Unconnected to paperwork, unconnected to your binder. Not to say you don't have that stuff available when you need it, but like, let's sit here like Michael Leaserman talks about in his depositions, and let me put my hands on the table. Let me not fidget with my phone. Let me not fidget with anything. Let me just take in this experience as my client is taking it in, as the jurors are taking it in. Because then you better respond in the present, right? You're being present. You are better able to feel the energy in the room. One of these trials, I think we had a client, we had him all prepped. He's going to give all his testimony, right? He's going to really testify well. And I think like the 4th question I asked him was about his grandkids. And he got really choked up. Right? He could barely, how would you feel? I think he answered it with a question like, how would you feel if you couldn't pick him up? And he started to cry. And I thought, normally you'd be like, oh my gosh, this is really good. Like, this is really positive. We're going to let's show what's going on. But we had called him early in the case, and I didn't think based on the feeling, I was like, I don't feel like this is ready. Like their jurors this is going to be pandering. This is going to be a little bit too early. And so all the crap that we were going to talk about, I don't have any more questions. No more questions. Like we'll just stop there, right? All the stuff I had told them that he was going to say in opening, it really doesn't matter when you get to like, if they feel that you're a trustworthy person, they'll understand what you're saying. They may not get it literally, but understand the feeling that comes with it. And we stopped right there. I felt like it was the right move. It turned out to be the right move. Then the defense got up and just hammered him on inconsistencies in his deposition testimony, his medical, just bullied him paper after paper after paper. And it caused the jurors to recoil, right? This was just a genuine man who wasn't trying to he was just trying to do his best. And he wasn't the most articulate. And so, but he's a great guy. So those things were trying to stay super present in the courtroom. And that WGON is a sticky note that goes right there. Because I need a lot of reminders. Right. I need a lot of like shoulder taps of, hey, why don't you take it down enough? Stuff like that, like pay attention, listen. And I'm I think in the Super Bowl, it was the Super Bowl. Maybe it was NFC playoffs. One of the Eagles wide receivers was reading a book on the sideline. You guys know what I'm talking about? Does that ring a bell?
Inner excellence.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Now it was one of the wide receivers. And if you listen to he got like 1 catch that game. Okay. I think he wasn't even really involved. His comments afterwards were so positive and like encouraging about, his role and what he was doing. And I'm like, if a guy in the NFL needs a reminder during the game to read that book, I need the same thing at trial. I need the same thing like tattooed on my forehead, right? Like, so this is like, let's put down, and I'm embarrassed by it sometimes, right? It's like a little sticky note, WGON, and the defense usually has papers everywhere, and they say, well, what's that? I don't want to forget something. It's kind of what I say. And we try to keep a really clean table, super clean table. Looks like we know what we're doing, and just keep that there. And it does help keep me, believe it or not, something as simple as that keeps me in the moment. If I catch myself drifting to like reach down for the briefcase or look at some, I'll just, I see it. kind of recenters and works most of the time.
That's all. You're right. I mean, by the time you're at trial, if you've prepared, I mean, you don't really need it. Yeah, you really don't. It's more of a crutch than anything.
It is. And so it was like we get ready for all this impeachment stuff and all that stuff. It's like, yeah, I mean, whatever. We can impeach a bunch of people. I had an officer up there one time who was just completely lying. And I didn't really impeach him, but he was so obvious he was lying. Just looked at the jurors and looked back at him and looked at the jurors, and they kind of like half smirked. And I was like, I'll go sit down.
And
it's like
that's what people lose sight of. You're like, well, I'm going to impeach him. Let me. They don't know what impeachment means. Right? They know what lying means. They know what body language.
They don't. Yeah. They know when like they're looking at that and they're looking at what he says and looking at that. He's acting all weird. And I'm frustrated because I'm not that sharp in my feet to like pull out. But I'm like, I don't know. Looks like he's at the wrong intersection, folks. Or whatever. I'm going to go sit down. And he was at the wrong intersection.
Yeah, there really is a difference between like what you read in the textbook and what actually happens in the courtroom. And actually, impeachment is funny when we talk about cross-examination. Impeachment's always like the number one thing, but in reality, I mean, impeachment's not that common. The traditional like what is it? Commit, credit, confront. Like it's just not that common. In fact,
it's because the easy technique to teach. It's a good low-hanging fruit to teach like the steps, right? Like, oh, this is how you do it, and look at this technique I've taught you. I'm not saying it's unimportant, okay? Like there's a way you have to know the skill, but I think a lot of times it's overplayed, and you sometimes run into some judges, and maybe Niall will be one of these, where I had a judge who was like, he was very strict on impeachment. It was like, I want to see the question you're asking, because if it's not word for word the same question from his deposition or from their prior statement, that's not impeachment. Like I want to see that was in. I was like, kind of respect it, like he's like, I got the rules here, and like, I'm not like, we're not going to slop through this. Either ask the question the way it was, or don't like trick this guy or gal or witness into like thinking they had a certain statement and you kind of tweaked it a little.
Yeah. Well, and in a situation like that, have you ever come across a guy named Terrence McCarthy? He's got a bunch of good YouTube videos. He's got a few books. He's a former federal public defender, I think in Chicago, but he's got his analogy for impeachment is like, it's all about fishing. It's like you set the hook and you pull it and all that, but he's like, let the little fish go, right? Like if it's just a small little inconsistency, then what are you doing? Just let it go. Like you're going to look like an idiot pursuing it. So,
yeah, I totally agree with that. It's like, and that's part of the distinction of the trials is figuring out what issues do you let go? What issues do you really go after?
Yeah, absolutely. So where are you now in terms of like your trial lawyer journey? And I'm getting the sense like you're doing a lot of the Rowley stuff, trial by human stuff. Is there a certain event that you're going to more often nowadays?
No, but now we're doing, so on the business side of the firm, we're doing fireproof. And so we're really focusing on like making quarterly goals and doing, because I've never been like, I see Darrell Champion talk a lot about like goals are overrated. I kind of agree with it a little bit to an extent, but you also have to have some kind of standard that you're trying to achieve. So it's a tricky balance. My goal was like when I was like, we were playing a sport, if my goal is just to bench press 325 pounds and I make that my singular goal, that's not helpful to anything else, right? It has to work in conjunction with other things. So in terms of what I'm going to, I have to make one of my things for the first quarter is I have to sign up for a trial seminar. The problem I'm running into, Sharif, is my kids are now at an age where I'm coaching or I'm helping coach. The weekends are very busy and, it's hard to pick up and go. And I'm just going to have to start making hard choices, right? This is, hey, sometimes it hurts to do this, but in the long run, it will pay off. And so I'm looking for the right ones. Like there's a couple, if there was a trial by human, I would love to go to it. But they've got such a busy calendar. One of my favorite ones was Ethos that Rick Friedman gave. And that was just an incredible experience. I've done 2 of those and I would love to get back to those, but it's for us, you guys too. It's like, it's so far up in the Northwest that there's a lot of travel there. You can't go day of and come back. And it's like a 4 or 5 day deal. And the time difference is so great for me, for you guys too. It would be like 3 hours for you, Sharif. You say you get done at 7:00 at night at Rick's, it's 10 p.m. back where you're never going to get a hold of you're never going to talk to your kids or, you're going to miss them for 5 days. So my journey is mostly podcast related. just really listening to a bunch of stuff and reading a ton of stuff. I have really enjoyed reading about the practice. The only drawback about reading for me is I usually like to read before I go to bed, and I cannot read trial stuff before I go to bed because I can see Niall shake. Like you're
not going to bed.
On fire. You're not going to bed. You're not going to bed.
The
You're going to read one
notepad
page.
comes out.
Yeah, like you like Sharif Russ. Like if you're reading like Way of the Trial Lawyer or whatever, whatever Rick Friedman's book is, I honest to God, I can't finish the book. Yes, I can't finish the book because I can only read 2 pages at a time before I'm like, oh my God, all right, let's think. And so I had to put it away. And I'll get back to it, but I'm much better at the article, right? Give me an article. I'll read an article. I really like those. But the full books, like Bill Barton's book, has been on my nightstand. And when he said that line about operate just under capacity, I haven't gotten past it. I've been on it for like 3 weeks, 4 weeks. That's all I've been thinking about.
Chris, you and I are in the same boat with books. So
I switched to fiction.
I need pictures. That's where I'm at.
I switched to fiction. Like, honestly, my wife now goes and we got a library right by our house, a beautiful library just down the street that the kids can walk to, and she'll walk and grab a book, and it's fiction. And I got to tell you, it's the greatest. Like, I'm not picking out books for myself anymore. I can just read that at night. It's so much better.
Well, Chris, this has been fun. We're on a great episode. But no, what my point is, we've kind of got some questions that we've been asking almost each person. And so now take it away.
I'm going to, Sharif, my question is going to be more of wrapping it up, tail end, because it's important to what we started with Chris introducing himself, and he talked about how he has 5 kids. Chris, I'm going to fast forward you a few years, and I hope you have a very, long, joyful, and successful life. And if your kids later on are asked, hey, tell me about your dad. How does Chris Finney want to be remembered? And you have 5 of them now. And if you could pick whoever's going to give the best answer. So how does Chris Finney want to be remembered when they're asked? I know it's a tough question, but it's because you started with your kids, and I want to end with how you want to be remembered.
Yeah.
I can tell Niall's missing his calling as a plaintiff's lawyer, because if he started a jury selection, it would just be over. Right, the case would be over. People would be like, "Yeah, whatever you said, dude. I'm going with you." But also, how would I want? The simplest thing that you would really want your kids to think of was that they could say, "Yeah, I know my dad loved me. I know he cared, and I know he tried, and I know he loved my mom." I think those things, if they're just that simple, if they knew that, right? They knew it. They just didn't say it, but they actually knew it. That would be considered a successful life under any circumstance. And so those things, if any 5 of them could say that, I would consider a full life. Yeah.
I have no doubt you're going to be living a full life, and they're going to be looking back and reflecting on that full life that you've lived, Chris. It's been a pleasure having you on this podcast and just learning from you. And we wish you nothing but the best. And I always want you just right under capacity, because that's the blessing of the business that you've built. And we are rooting for you, and we want to continue to watch your successes into the future.
Well, thanks, man, and congrats to you. That's exciting news for you.
I appreciate you so greatly.
Thank you, Chris. This has been fun.
Thank you for listening to this episode of RVA Trial Lawyers, Virginia's Trial Lawyer podcast. For more episodes, check out rvatriallawyers.com.